A little prelude to the sermon today. I want to warn you that in the middle of it, I'm going to take a break and we're going to hear a little bit more from Alex. I've just separated this sermon into two parts. Sometimes this talking head in a video format, I think, gets a little wearisome after 7 or 8 minutes. So we'll take a little break and we'll see how that works today. So please don't expect that when I stop the first time that it's all over. I'm coming back. So thank you very much. You know, it was almost a decade ago that I was starting work as a social justice ministry facilitator for a 125-member UU congregation in Arizona. We were implementing an organizing model that's called congregation-based community organizing, and it's primarily known by its acronym CBCO. At the core of CBCO is a commitment to building relationships, healthy, effective relationships between congregants and members of the broader community, and between the institutional identity of our congregation and other institutions, whether they be multi-faith partners or other agencies and organizations. I was working with 10 or 12 members of the newly formed Social Justice Ministry Council. And we were growing, as we were working together, we were growing our dedication to the idea that our faith calls us to recognize that we find meaning, or if you prefer spiritual fulfillment, in relationship with others, not in isolation. We were learning that true fulfillment has to do with both personal meaning and social responsibility. They do not compete. They reinforce one another. As the UU minister, Reverend Richard Gilbert, wrote in his book, The Prophetic Imperative, Social Gospel in Theory and Practice, Gilbert wrote, "The deeper that we delve into the innermost recesses of our souls, the more intensely we identify with other human beings. The further inward we explore, the more we see our common humanity. The more the unseen moves us, the more we understand the hidden bonds of community." And so the deeper we probe spiritually, the more we identify with others and cast our lot with them in battling all that keeps us from celebrating our mystic bonds. You know, the UU language of Gilbert's book is 20 years old now. And even the language 8 years ago that I was working with as that new ministry, social justice ministry facilitator, Gilbert and I both spoke of something called the brokenness of this world. That was our language then. And we also used the idea that we wanted to represent our faithful expressions of healing that brokenness. But in the beginning of that social justice ministry, there was unease and plenty of discussion with the use of the phrase faithful expressions of healing brokenness. Many folks in that small congregation were reacting as individuals who had rejected other beliefs. And for some, the sense of antipathy toward those rejected beliefs was seen as the primary connection we had with one another. Our developing justice ministry was asking us to live the principles we held in common. We were learning that those commonly held beliefs would form stronger bonds in our community rather than those formed by merely rejecting other beliefs. And just as Reverend Peter Morales, the Peter Morales quote that I read in our chalice lighting, just as that quote challenged us to pursue a possible dream, the justice ministry began sorting out that congregation's possible dreams. The existence of an ongoing ministry helped us remain accountable to each other, to our broader community, and to our dreams. Through open, shared experiences, the congregation began to act. And each action was deliberately, and each one was followed with reflection, at which time we asked, how did we do? What did we learn? How does this action inform our next action? This cycle of action and reflection is integral to the CBCO model. And through this time of reflection, we learned that not all our actions were carried out as we planned, nor had the results been what we had predicted. But we learned from each action, and what we learned propelled us into a congregational process of coming to terms with the mission for our religious community. I am not suggesting that justice making should be seen as our UU substitute for a coherent theology. But the actions of the newly formed justice ministry were shaping a coherent sense of our shared beliefs. And wrangling our shared beliefs is a powerful predicate to theological exploration and distillation. In that small UU congregation in Arizona, there were and still are several justice actions underway. I want to close this first section, urging us all to consider that here in our small UU fellowship in Michigan, we are beginning a kind of justice ministry. Maybe we'll call it a justice ministry, maybe we won't. We just don't know that yet. But I invite you all to be part of this work, and I encourage you to recognize that justice making is a powerful part of our spiritual and religious journey. In our religious community, I hope we energize the connection between justice actions and our individual search for meaning. I hope we grow to realize that through KUUF, we are citizens of our human and natural world community, as well as supporting a center of human consciousness. Let's take a break and let's listen to Alex play. And as I warned you, I'll come back after Alex plays. Thanks, Leonard. Well, there we go. Okay, good. You know, the best of all plans sometimes don't always work out. So obviously, on my end, I'm not hearing the piano. Are other people hearing the piano? No. Okay, I got heads shaking. So Leonard, let's just pause that and yeah, come back. Boy, that was a good break, wasn't it? I'm sure you're all refreshed and ready to hear more. Okay. I'm going to take a belated drink here. We might try the break again next week just to check it out. But in this second part, I'm reminded of years ago when the UUA republished an article that was written by a gentleman named Thomas Price. And it was entitled, "The 4 Types of Social Concern." And in the article, Price suggests 4 basic options in describing the role of the church or religious community in society. And I'll admit, I have used, and I think other UUs used Price's framework as a way to help look at and organize congregational justice action. The 4 types of social concern, according to Price, are social service, social education, social witness, and social action. Social service might well be thought of as the charitable approach. Responding to essential needs of our neighbors is compelling in its immediacy. Giving food to someone who does not have any immediately and temporarily changes a person's life. It is most likely the impermanence of the charitable mode that leads to Price's second dimension, social education. The idea is that once you experience, albeit the need of another, it is important that we begin to understand what happened and why. What are the social and moral conditions that create injustice? Education is a tool for creating social change. Price actually called it out as the first step in creating change. I want to note that social education is also a moment for people in our community to learn about social issues in the light of our religious tradition. As an example of this, I am reminded of this year's General Assembly Sunday service where the Reverend Joan Javier Duval called on us all to know where we are, to know where we've come from, and to know the ancestors of our religious tradition. In this way, incorporating this, and in this way, learning incorporates the idea of reflection that I mentioned earlier. And we must always include our evolving religious tradition in our reflections. When injustice is exposed through experience and reflection, Price's third dimension of social responsibility becomes possible. He called it social witness. This is the process of making public by word or deed the convictions on social issues of an individual or a group, and in our case, we're talking about KUUF as that group. We act in witness of the injustice, and we bring our voice to the public discussion around that concern. By bringing our voice, we are compelled to move into the fourth element, what Price called social action. He distinguishes social action from the other three modes of social concern by recognizing that one, it is an organized activity signifying a group support of objectives. And secondly, its target is policy change or institutional change, and its focus is on structures rather than people. This is change that could eliminate the need for charity and reconcile and restructure injustices we have witnessed. About 4 weeks ago, members of KUUF formed 3 moving forward teams to help us move forward in our anti-racism work. The teams are, and watch the names here, the Continuation of Study team, the Public Statement team, and the Action team. They are most certainly aligned with Price's types of social concern, and they include, in our case, a coherent anti-racist focus. That focus grew out of a discussion group that read Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility. 15 KUUF members recently spent 3 Sunday afternoons in conversation around pulling back the veil on what DiAngelo called the pillars of whiteness. These are assumptions that prop up racist beliefs, oftentimes without our realizing it. This reading and discussion group is an example of social education, and it was organized immediately following an act of social witness that saw hundreds of people, young and old, I will say, march across the bridge in Houghton in support of Black Lives Matter and in honor of George Floyd. Each of our moving forward teams has met a couple of times. And we're beginning with a public statement from KUUF declaring our support for the Black Lives Matter movement. At today's board meeting, the final draft of that public statement is being reviewed and hopefully affirmed. There are plans for continuing our study, of what Reverend Javier Duval might call the study of our ancestors of our democracy, a study of our history, revealing the need for anti-racist strategies and practices, will be happening through shared discussions of videos and books. Many of these sessions will be open to the broader community, and some will focus on UU faith development, and in those, our audience will be each of us. I urge you to keep track of these study moments as they're announced in the digest. In keeping with the education reflection mode, this last Thursday's digest had an introduction to a weekly drop-in group called Energizing Hope Together. This is an outgrowth of our Moving Forward teams and will be led by Action Team member Janine Stevenson. As the announcement stated, this will be a place where people can support each other in our social justice work of dismantling racism and other oppressions in ourselves and institutions. In this group, we will share our experiences through deep listening, empathy, and practical strategies. This group will explore these and other ways to increase our motivation and energize our sense of hope. Our action team has also already reached out to the Copper Country Intermediate School District representatives, beginning a conversation that may lead to restructuring what and how children are learning history. Really simply put, through relationship, we are starting to work for structural change. There are other trainings and areas of exploration the action team has begun to develop. And I really want to say this, that the action team will mature its capacity for this work and in partnership with others, continue to take on structural issues. I've been in each of the team meetings and I've seen serious efforts to develop what Reverend Morales called possible dreams. Now, our accountability to those dreams and to people of color will be defined by the effectiveness of our work. That's why there's a second offering from the action teams to the board for today's discussion later. It's called the Persistence Calendar. It is proposed that we build a calendar on our website that is populated with the events and actions of our Moving Forward teams and other community organizations that are committed to dismantling racism in ourselves and our institutions. It will take persistence and I think a whole bunch of possible dreams to make it so. I've been thinking that the calendar will be a public statement of our commitment to reflect on the act of revolution that started so boldly yet so flawed 244 years ago. I think it's time to put a calendar to our justice making. Thank you.